hidden messages, deadly warnings, and curses said to bring slow, painful death. These are forbidden ancient Viking artifacts they were warned not to study. There's an enormous slab of granite standing in Blekinge, Sweden. It's 13 feet tall, and it's been sitting in the same spot for over 1,300 years. So what is it? A gravestone? A war memorial? No and no. It was built for one specific reason: to carry a curse. The runes carved into it aren't regular Viking writing either. They're from an older, more ritualistic alphabet people at the time considered far more powerful. It says the person who carved it hid runes of power inside the stone, and if you mess with it, you're gonna die, and not quickly. You're looking at a slow, treacherous, drawn-out death. There's a story from the 1400s. A farmer wanted the land cleared and decided the stone needed to come down. His plan was to pile wood around the base, heat the granite until it's hot enough, then throw cold water on it so it would crack apart. Well, on the day he tried it, with zero wind in the air, apparently, a sudden gust came out of nowhere, reversed the flames, and burned him alive. The stone didn't have a scratch on it. Well, from that point on, nobody touched the thing. The Glavendrup Stone holds the record for the longest runic inscription ever found in Denmark. A woman named Ragnhild had it carved to honor her husband, Alle, who was a high-ranking priest or chieftain. The beginning of it is a tribute to him, a proper memorial, but the end of it is something else entirely. It says that anyone who damages the stone or moves it to honor somebody else will become Arger. What does that word mean? Well, to say that Arger is an insult would be a gross understatement. Calling someone Arger in Viking society could be a death sentence, either for the person being called it or the accuser. It basically meant coward. So if you were called this, especially as a man, you had legal grounds to defend your honor to the death. And if you didn't do anything about it, you could basically be demoted to a second-class citizen. Anyone could rob you, attack you, or unalive you, and no one was going to do a thing about it. By carving that word into the stone, Ragnhild was giving the entire community permission to destroy the life of anyone who disrespected this site. And it worked. The stone is still perfectly intact after all this time. The Eggja Stone is one of the stranger finds in Norway. When archaeologists dug it up, it was face down over a grave. The runes were on the underside, pressed against the dirt, pointing down, of course, at the body beneath it. The text describes a BLOOD sacrifice. It says the stone was never exposed to sunlight and wasn't carved with a regular blade. It was carved with a ritual tool used specifically for magic. And then it tells the dead person to stay where they are, warns the living not to open the grave. Vikings had a real serious fear of draugr, and these were basically said to be zombies that kept the full intelligence of the person they used to be, and not the slow, mindless zombies that we often think of today. A draugr was smart, and more importantly, physically powerful. The belief was that if you didn't seal a grave with the right ritual, the person inside could get back out. The Eggja Stone may have been that seal. Placing it face down over the body was like locking a vault from the outside, a vault specifically designed to stay locked forever. The Stentoften Runestone is similar to the Björketorp we talked about at the top. It was found in a field in Sweden and uses almost identical language: perpetual death and insidious harm to anyone who disturbs the monument. But there's an extra layer to this one. It mentions prophecy and power in a way that strongly suggests the land around it was used for cedar. Cedar was a form of Viking sorcery that most people were genuinely afraid of, not skeptical about, actually frightened by. Involved communicating with spirits, and it was considered so dangerous and strange that even hardened warriors wanted nothing to do with it. It was basically dark witchcraft. When the runestone was found in the 1800s, it was going to be moved to a church for safekeeping. A lot of people just refused to help though, not wanting whatever negative energy that was attached to it to be transferred to them. On the Danish island of Bornholm, archaeologists dug up a burial that had nothing to do with honoring the dead. The body had been brutalized after the person was already gone. Giant boulders stacked on the chest and legs, a heavy wooden stake driven straight through the torso into the ground below. Obviously, they wanted to make sure this person stayed down. As I mentioned before, the Viking fear of the dead rising from their graves was real. This particular person scared everyone so much that dying is not considered a good enough guarantee, so they crushed them with rocks and pinned them to the earth with a stake, just to feel safe at night. These got called vampire burials by modern researchers, and similar burials have been found in other parts of Europe as well. The Rök Runestone in Sweden has the longest runic inscription ever found anywhere in the world. For a long time, people assumed it was hero myths, old poetry, interesting but nothing more than that. But when researchers really looked into it, what they found was completely different. It's more of a warning. The text talks about the sun disappearing and crops dying, which is what Vikings called Fimble Winter, brutal, endless winter that they believed would come right before Ragnarok. Basically the end times. And scientists have been able to confirm that right around the time this stone was carved, there was this string of huge volcanic eruptions that went off around the world, and the temperature in Scandinavia had dropped. Yeah, even more than usual. That would have been awful. The sky darkened, crops would have failed, a massive portion of the population starved or froze to death. The people living through it genuinely believed the world was ending because, from where they were standing, kinda was. In Norway, a woman was found buried in a boat. That part is normal. Boat burials were an honorable way to go in Viking culture. What wasn't normal were the large scallop shells that had been jammed into her mouth. Nothing like this exists anywhere else in the Viking record, not even close. The shells didn't seem to be decorative, they were forced in there, and in a lot of ancient cultures, forcibly closing the mouth of a dead person usually meant they were trying to keep them quiet, or stopping the spirit from speaking, or stopping something from getting back in through the body. Because this doesn't match anything else we know from Norse culture, though, nobody's been able to fully explain it. This was either some very rare ritual, or maybe even just a single specific case. The Snoldelev Stone was found in Denmark, dates back to around the 800s. At first glance, it doesn't look that intense. It's just a rune stone with a short inscription saying it was raised for a man named Gunvalder, who was the son of Hraldr. Pretty standard Viking memorial, but then you notice the symbols carved into it. There's a set of 3 interlocked drinking horns, what people now call the triple horn of Odin. In Norse stories, these horns are tied to the mead of poetry, which is all about wisdom, status, and power. Probably meant the person buried here had some kind of importance. While the stone doesn't actually have a curse written on it, people often treat it like it does. That idea comes from other Viking runestones that did include warnings, mixed with the fact that Odin really wasn't seen as a calm or forgiving god, so over time it's turned into something else. Not just a memorial, but something that feels like it carries some ominous weight. The Saleby Runestone in Sweden doesn't threaten you with death or curses or divine punishment. It goes after something that for a Viking was arguably worse. The inscription says that anyone who breaks the stone will be shunned and dishonored. One of the specific words on the stone is rata, which, similar to Arger, seemed to carry real weight. It's been translated to mean a wretch, outcast, or warlock. And not warlock in the sense that you'd gain magical powers, more that you'd be considered abnormal, a freak. To understand why this was so important, you have to understand what reputation meant in Viking society. Sure, you had an afterlife with Valhalla, but what was considered super important after you died was your name, what people said about it. Your reputation was your legacy. So being called a rata wasn't just embarrassing, it meant your name would be spoken with contempt. Not just now, but by the generations that came after. For a warrior, that kind of social death, that was the threat that actually kept them up at night. The Oseberg Ship burial in Norway is one of the most famous Viking discoveries ever made. Incredibly preserved, beautifully crafted, clearly the resting place of someone of very high status. And somewhere inside the structure of that ship, hidden in a spot where no one would ever see it unless they were actively taking the ship apart, someone carved 2 words into a small piece of wood. Rather than butchering the language, I'll just say the translation, man knows little. It wasn't meant to be read by mourners or visitors. It was a place in a spot that would only be reached by someone disturbing the burial, which means it was left specifically for people like, well, the archaeologists who eventually found it. And that's been the video. I'll catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next one.